Thank you very much. Let me start by thanking Outlook Business, IDFC Bank, and all of you here this afternoon for providing me an opportunity to share some of my views. In the interest of full disclosure, I started my professional life in Mumbai when I joined the private sector in the year 1973. I left it within a few months to take up a teaching job in Delhi University and then joined the Indian Foreign Service where I served 39 years. Since this session is all about the economy, I should also place on record that I've been 2 years plus, 2 years, 3 months, Minister for Housing and Urban Affairs. And for the last 4 or 5 months, I've also been Minister for Civil Aviation and Commerce and Industry. So all three portfolios, directly and indirectly, deal with issues with which you all are preoccupied. Since the time available to me is not unlimited, I just want to pick on a few issues that I think are relevant in understanding the current economic situation and also to see how we are to navigate the way forward. And I'm particularly fortunate that the head of the IDFC Bank set the tone and provided a perspective. I'm broadly in agreement with his conclusions, but since I'm not a banker, I view the process from the point of view of a former diplomat and now somebody who's in public life. I think he got the timing almost right. The genesis of what we are dealing with today started with what was then termed as the world economic and global economic and financial crisis. This hit the stage, the global stage, if I remember correctly, sometime in 2008. That was a time when the finance ministers of the G20, as it became later, were meeting in Sao Paulo in Brazil to grapple with a new situation which they did not fully comprehend. And that situation arose from the real estate sector in the United States, and particularly one small segment, the subprime lending sector. What happened is that whether you wanted a loan to buy a property, there were bankers, given the liquidity that was available, or other people in that industry who were chasing people to provide that money. And that bubble ultimately affected not only the United States, and you have a long list of those whose obituaries were written, financial institutions, but then I think it affected Europe, it affected large parts of Asia, and we remained unaffected, largely on account of the fact that we were not sufficiently integrated in the global market. I want to view this proposition slightly differently. As a student of global economic development, having served in different parts of the world, some of which were named by the young lady who was introducing me, I have never come across a situation where economies, individual economies or groups of economies or the global system grow in perpetuity for all times to come. The way I look at it, the last 11 years we have seen expansive growth. By and large, I think our friend from the IDFC Bank gave you the figures. So if you expect that there is to be a growth without course correction or a growth which is immune from what's happening in the global scenario, I think that's wishful thinking. So compared to where we started and where we are going, I think we haven't done too badly. And for instance, what are the hard facts today? As Minister for Urban Affairs, I deal with public transport. Today in India, we have a metro network which is close to, I think, about 687 kilometers. It is world-class. In Delhi alone, we have about 370, 380 kilometers of metro. It is a first-class asset. It compares with the best metro systems in the world. It is also affordable. We have another 900 kilometers of metro under construction. Why am I providing this fact to you? Because when I became Minister for Housing and Urban Affairs on 3rd September 2017, metro fares in India had not risen for 9 years for a variety of reasons. 6 months earlier, or rather a few months even before that, a fare fixation committee decided that the metro fares needed to be raised because you had borrowed money to construct this world-class asset and that loan had to be repaid. So the fare fixation committee decided that the metro fares would go up, but in 2 segments, because they hadn't been raised for 9 years, so instead of doing it in one go, so the first raise came in May 2017. I became minister in September. So we have a populist government in Delhi, which believes in providing free bus rides, free electricity, free everything. I hope you are saved that prospect in Mumbai. But I am coming to a simple thing. When the second installment had to take place in October, there was a hue and cry. Well, uneducated minister, he's been a civil servant, he doesn't know how it runs, you must stop this fare hike. And I had a very simple answer. This is a statutory body presided over by a judge of the Delhi High Court, retired judge, and there's nothing that the Chief Minister of Delhi or the Union Minister can do in terms of fare fixation. Because if you were to make the Chief Minister of a state in charge of fare fixation or a Union Minister, fares would never go up. Because a politician typically will pander to populist pressures and make everything free. So luckily it's been insulated from that madness. Anyway, to cut a long story short, there was a lot of hue and cry. The ridership on Delhi Metro in September of 2017, when this second phase of the hike was to take place, was 2.4 million or 24 lakhs. Do you know what the rider? And then we were told metro has been destroyed, it's going empty, pollution levels are going up because people can't afford to go by the metro. Do you know what the ridership on metro today is in Delhi? It was 2.4 million then. Sometimes it's 6.5 million. Or even on the lower rates, it's 60 lakhs a day. I'm making a very basic point. When you talk about the slowdown in the automobile industry, I'm not sure that there is a slowdown in the automobile industry. I'm coming to that because many of you know more about the automobile industry. I read a very interesting piece this morning when they said, bring the cost of ownership down. Yeah, cost of ownership you can bring down. But whenever you increase the public transport availability and you provide last mile connectivity, as in New York, I lived many years in New York, nobody takes out his personal car in New York. You take public transport, Uber, Uber, Ola. So I'm just making a simple proposition. If the automobile industry figures are down 1% or 1.6%, put that on one side. On the other side, you take metro ridership, which has gone up from 2.4 million to 6 million or 6.5. Also, in that same graph, you put the rise in this so-called radio cab system, Ola and Uber. And please tell me after that, if that is a structural slowdown or what it is, let's try and analyze it. And the auto industry people themselves are divided on what it is. I don't want to go into where the Sensex is going, etc., but I'm trying to understand the phenomena. Our friend from the IDFC Bank spoke about the construction sector. I know a little bit about it because I deal with it 24 hours in a day. What was the problem in the construction sector? First of all, the sector is important, make no mistake. After agriculture, it is the second largest sector. It provides very high percentage of the GDP. It is the second largest employer after the agriculture sector. But what was the situation in terms of urban housing. Since we are in a group of mature adults, I think it's good to acknowledge what the reality was. The reality was that we had a very strong parallel economy where the proceeds of under-invoicing and over-invoicing found themselves into gunny bags. And people, rather than keep those gunny bags full of cash at home, would find out through their contacts as to who a builder or a supplier or a promoter is. They would take those gunny bags to that person and say, "Agli baar jab aap project karenge, 2 flat hamare naam bhi kar dijiye." I don't think the builder or promoter ever counted the cash in the bag. There were some very good builders, some very good promoters, some very good projects which got built, but a lot of people saw a lot of money available and they said, let's make merry. They utilized those funds in order to invest in land banks. So what happened is a lot of money went into land banks and price of land started falling, and a host of things started. And there was a huge mismatch between what was required. Some very genuine people got affected. People who had put their entire life savings into that sector. They borrowed from banks, projects could not be delivered. We are trying to deal with the aftermath of that situation. And let me tell you, that's where the good news is. That's where the government brought in the Real Estate Regulation Act, or RERA. When the act came into being, a lot of people said it's not good enough. They challenged it. But the people who challenged RERA were not the people who didn't think it was good enough. It was the people who challenged it were the people who were benefiting from that culture of impunity which prevailed, and they were happily distorting the system. So all the challenges the Supreme Court took and sent into the High Court of Mumbai. I had just become a minister and people told me, what happens if RERA is struck down? I said, I'll bet my bottom dollar, if I had one, that the judiciary will uphold RERA because it is so obvious. Anyway, RERA has come into being. It has started the process of ensuring good governance through greater transparency and accountability. It regulates and promotes the real estate sector. It protects the interest of consumers. It brings a smooth flow of information between the promoter and the purchaser. It brings uniformity, professionalism, accountability, and standardization in business transactions and practices in this sector. It establishes a mechanism for fast-track dispute resolution and ensures a fair play and infuses transparency and reducing frauds. I want to place on record, whilst I'm speaking in Mumbai, that Maharera, or Maharashtra RERA in particular, headed by my friend Gautam Chatterjee, has been particularly successful. There are other states which have done well also. Now, we are in a situation where we have taken many other steps, and I'll just run through them because this gives me an opportunity to bring home to some of you who may not be familiar with this. We introduced an amendment to the Benami Transactions Prohibition Act 2016. We introduced a system of online building permissions where we have jumped. We used to be 181 position. You know, the world has, in the UN, 193 countries. We were listed at 181 in 2017. We jumped to 52nd position in 2018, and in 2019, we are down to 27th position. I take great pride in this because this was done by me personally. The idea is that if you are asking for permission, do it online. You don't have to face somebody who will get you into a discussion which is irrelevant or not relevant to the project, and it's working. And I also read a report and a comment somewhere that at this current rate, there are only 5 or 6 countries in the world which are better than us in that. So it's been a very good story. With this online business permission was introduced in Delhi and Mumbai in April 2016. Then I took it to our 500 Amrut cities where we had 440 cities and all 13 states and UTs, and it's going to be implemented in all cities in India by December 2019. My friend from the IDFC Bank, and he will forgive me if I'm referring to his thing, but he's laid out a perspective and I'm picking on pieces. He spoke about the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. Those of you who live in Mumbai and live in, where God has been kind to you and live in apartments which are valued in crores rather than in lakhs, let me tell you there is another part to India, and a part which I deal with. The Prime Minister decided, after he was first elected in May 2014, he decided that by the year 2022, when India will celebrate its 75th anniversary as an independent nation, every Indian, no matter where he or she lives, will have a house which he or she can call their own. It should be a pakka dwelling with a kitchen, a shauchalaya or a toilet. It should be built to green standards. So the ministry did a survey, an assessment survey. How many homes would you need to build in order to make sure that every Indian has a home by the year 2022? He didn't stop there. He said the title of the home will be in the name of the lady of the house, a major step for gender empowerment. Why did the Prime Minister take that step? For a very simple reason. Anyone who knows our social structure knows that in the case of marital discord or any other problem, it is the lady of the house who will be shortchanged. So, and if you give the title to the lady, it may alter the balance, and believe me, it's working. And because, not only because feminist groups have welcomed it, but I'm saying in practice, all states are enthusiastically implementing it. If not in the name of the lady of the house, the lady has to be at least co-jointly holding the title. So the assessment which was done is that you needed to construct 1 crore or 10 million homes by the year 2022. We have what is called a committee to monitor and sanction projects. That committee in my ministry is headed by the secretary in the ministry. We are implementing the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, or affordable housing scheme, through 4 verticals. And I just spent 30 seconds on each vertical. The first is the in-situ slum rehabilitation, where large informal settlements, I prefer to call them informal settlements rather than slums, come up in the heart of cities. Why? Because poor people come there from rural areas, from other cities looking for work. They find the work there and invariably set up informal settlements or what you call slum-like conditions. So there is that vertical. The second one is what is called a credit-linked subsidy scheme, which is an interest subvention. So you're a young, upwardly mobile professional, you want to buy an apartment, your first apartment, husband and wife are earning, you go to a bank, and my friend from IDFC Bank or somebody will typically charge you 12% or 13%, whatever the rate at that point of time is. If you avail of a facility here, the government, under this vertical, will give you 3% upfront as a payment. So that brings the cost of borrowing down. The third one is beneficiary-led development. This happens in places like Goa. You have a traditional family home. You've not had an opportunity to, to refurbish, or not refurbish is an internal, but, to do up the repairs and so on. The government will give you a small amount of money upfront to spend. And the fourth most important is affordable housing in partnership, where the government will provide land, and which typically is always 40-50% of the cost of an apartment. Then the state government and the central government will give you some money, 1.5 lakhs each. And this scheme is, all these 4 verticals are doing exceptionally well. Well, let me give you the good news. We were supposed to sanction 10 million by 2022. We have a meeting which takes place every month. In September, if not October, because we are now in November, maybe October figure, we had already sanctioned out of 10 million, 9.3 million out of 10 million, already done. And once you sanction it, the grounding takes place straight away. When the grounding takes place, it's in a question of 18 months with the technology. We've already grounded about 6 million, about 3.2 million have already been handed over. The point I'm making is, well before 2022, 2 years at least in advance, all 10 million will be not only handed over, completed and handed over. And this is a section where there used to be a lot of problem. Now, when we started implementing the scheme, a lot of people turned around and said that this cannot be done from budgetary resources. It fell on me when I became a minister to realize that. Because the budgetary allocation from the finance ministry invariably was 6,000, 8,000 crores. You don't construct 1 crore houses with 6,000, 8,000. So one of the first things I did was to go to my boss and tell him that this is a huge flagship program. It requires a new solution. And we were very lucky that extra budgetary resources of 60,000 crores were approved by the cabinet in February 2018. And in the last year, 1920, this one, 20,000 crores has been budgeted for. So it's when we were able to access this kind of funds through EBR that we were able to implement the scheme. Other things which have been done, I'll conclude that, then I want to make some comments on housing, real estate, and go into civil aviation. We provided infrastructure status to affordable housing in the harmonized list of infrastructure in March 2017. The cap on affordable housing units eligible for priority sector lending was also raised. We eased the FDI norms for real estate and brought 100% FDI under automatic route in construction projects, which includes townships, residential, commercial premises, roads and bridges, educational institutes, recreational facilities, etc. Fiscal and financial measures, GST for under construction affordable housing projects was reduced from 8% to 1%, with no input tax credit. And for other housing projects, it was brought down from 12% to 5%. In the interim budget for 2019 and 20, which was presented on 1st February this year, we did several other measures, including benefits under Section 81BA of the Income Tax Act. The TDS threshold on rental income was raised from 1.8 lakhs to 2.4 lakhs. And I have a series of steps which were taken, including most recently, when a stress fund of 25,000 crores was set up for completing projects which are in that limbo area. Corporate tax rates were slashed to 22% for domestic companies and 15% for new domestic manufacturing companies. We have set up, as I mentioned, an alternate investment fund, etc. If you ask CREDAI or Noretco, which I deal with on a daily basis, I would say that almost everything that they have asked for, we have responded to positively. Before I came here, one of the sponsors of the event suggested something else to provide a ready solution for, those housing projects which don't come under the affordable housing others. And my immediate response was, send me a proposal, and if it's workable. In other words, you have a government which is committed to addressing the challenges, the stress points in this sector, and I have absolutely no doubt that it's not the gloom picture which is being made out to be. I read a report yesterday that cement and steel prices are picking up. Now, if you look at the history of this period, the slowdown or the so-called imaginary slowdown started when cement and steel prices started showing adverse trend. So I don't know how many quarters it's going to take. Nobody has a magical wand, but if you look at the inventories are coming down. There are other positive signs in the marketplace. The narrative, I suspect, in the housing sector, certainly where I live in Delhi, is being largely shaped by 3 large projects in the National Capital Region. These are 3 large projects which are either before the NCLT or the Supreme Court is directing them. And I think there also the good news is that under the court's direction, we are getting a way forward. Why does this take place? this kind of a problem? Is it man-made? Is it structural? I must submit to you with all humility that this is a crisis created by the stakeholders. And it's a crisis which could have been avoided if we had a regulator in the sector initially, if we had some discipline. I mean, most countries in the world, people have money, borrow money from a bank and go and get a ready-made project. But because promoters and builders did not have access to finance, they resorted to this, and some practices which are not healthy came into being. And when demonetization came and GST came, as my friend from the IDFC said, he didn't use these words, but I'm going to use them. There was blood on the floor, but we are mopping it up now. And the good news is that this sector, like this sector in other countries, I mean, if you look at what we are doing in Delhi, we are going to confer ownership rights to 40 lakh people who live in unauthorized colonies. We are building the entire central vista in Delhi. I mean, Rashtrapati Bhavan, North and South Block, and Parliament will remain intact. All the other buildings which should never have been built in the first place, but which are not energy efficient, which don't conform to modern energy efficiency standards, etc., will be rebuilt. So construction in most countries in the world is a great critical driver of growth, and believe me, that's the situation in India. And if you guys are in that sector, I think you're looking at a win-win in a shorter than period of time than you imagine. I mean, I don't think it is. I mean, I was very impressed with the figures that my friend from the banking industry gave, because much of that, what we perceived to be growth, was the easy liquidity which was available. And instead of using that easy liquidity properly, we went and splurged. We didn't do it here. It happened in the United States. That's how the global financial and economic crisis also set up. I want to go away from a minute from construction to civil aviation. Again, the narrative, I think, when you have bad news, the narrative gets exemplified. When you have good news, people are a little more sober. Let me start by giving you first the negative news and then show you how quickly we have recovered. A major Indian airline, Jet Airways, went, or rather ceased operations. I want to use my words very carefully because the matter is still before the appropriate authorities. When Jet Airways ceased operations, we had something like 570 or 80 aircraft, civil aviation aircraft in the skies operating. My own view, and I maybe should not be talking like this, I think Jet Airways could have been saved. But Jet Airways could have been saved provided one of the promoters was willing to have it saved. Again, I became minister a few months later. I think Jet Airways ceased operation in April of 2019. Well, let me fast forward, as they say. Today, we have 690 aircraft flying, as against the 580 when Jet said. Nobody talks about Jet Airways, this thing. But when I become civil aviation minister in September, everybody said civil aviation is going. What is the problem in civil aviation? First, let me give you the good news. We are looking at 690 aircraft today. One of our airlines has just ordered 300 aircraft. 300 is probably one of the largest aircraft orders placed ever. I think we are looking at something like 2,000 civil aviation aircraft, Indian, in the skies before long. When I joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1974, and I went on my first posting to Tokyo in 1975, Delhi airport used to be called Palam International. It's called Indira Gandhi International Airport today. It used to handle annually 1.9 million passengers. Today, ladies and gentlemen, Indira Gandhi Airport in Delhi handles 70 million people, passengers in a year, from 1.9 to 70 million. The airport operator tells me that he is taking it up to 110 million with a fourth runway coming in. My own view is that if 70 could become 80, you have capacity constraints. We are building another airport in Jewar for which the bids have already come. When Jewar is operational in 3 or 4 years from now, and there are 4 very good bids, I'm told, Delhi Indira Gandhi International Airport and Jewar Airport together will handle more than 140 million, which is the largest conglomerate of Heathrow, Gatwick and Stansted. Today we have 100 airports. In 2 years' time, we will have 200 airports. 35 of them are dealing with international traffic. We'll have 200 airports with 70 of them dealing with international. With just a 7% penetration, which means out of 100 Indians, only 7 fly. But when you transit from being a $2.89 trillion economy to a $5 trillion economy, the penetration rate will go up in a massive manner. Before coming here, I was asking my joint secretary who deals with UDAN, or which is the regional connectivity scheme. And she was telling me that they've just done the bidding for the 4th round. We've already added something like 25 lakh passengers. This will go up. My view is that out of the 340 million or so passenger throughput that we are talking about, we are looking in the short 3 to 5 year period of 1 billion passengers. And civil aviation, along with construction, will be the critical drivers of economic growth in India. Now, one concluding comment I want to make. This is a reality. When I got up in Parliament to talk about one of these developments, some honorable members, this is why Parliament is such an exciting place, try to heckle me, oh no, you got your business model wrong. I said, wait a minute. It's not that I got my business model wrong or Indian air carriers got their business model wrong. This is a global phenomenon. The guys who make the engines, okay, whoever makes the engines, Rolls-Royce, Pratt & Whitney, General Electric, an engine is about 40% plus of the aircraft value. They laugh their way to the bank, even when their engines have faults and they're correcting them, but we put that aside. The guys who manufacture aeroplanes like Boeing and Airbus, they're always laughing their way to the bank. The guys who run the airports, and I forgot to give you the figures of Mumbai. Mumbai airport today handles more than 50 million passengers, and with this another airport, Navi Mumbai, coming up, it's going to be again, we are looking at an 80 million or plus this thing. So 140 million here, 80 million here, you're looking at a replacement of the hubs which have come up around India to be within India. And if I can do that in Hyderabad and Bangalore also, it's going to be a completely new ball game. And incidentally, when airports come up, construction activity also shoots up. You know, the guys who run the airports make money. The tourist industry, Ola, Uber, hotels, all make money. You know who loses money? Only the airlines themselves. They're not an Indian phenomena. When I was questioned in Parliament, I said, look, I can give you a long list of American carriers, flagship carriers, you know, Pan American, TWA, and if anybody's got a little recollection, Northwest, Southwest. Why does this happen? There's something in the business model. My daughter told me 25 years ago, she's in the financial industry, she said, you know, the airlines will always have a problem because of the business model. Why? It's a high capital intensive industry. We are not able to handle, I'm trying to sort it out, you know, handle jet aviation fuel. How do you price it? Frankly, you need to price jet aviation. But there's another problem. When you have a successful sector, the competition which you require to keep prices stable sometimes acts in a counterproductive way. Let me explain what I'm saying. Do you know what the fare on the trunk sector Mumbai, Delhi was 20 years ago? 5,100 rupees. Do you know what it is today, 20 years later? It is 4,600 rupees. How is that possible? It is possible only because these low-cost carriers are competing against each other and dumbing the thing down. So we have to now also start worrying about ensuring that our airlines or the airline operators, they are kept viable. Now, there is a dilemma here. As a person in, who has something to do with governance, we should be wanting airlines travel to be made more affordable. But there is a way of doing it. When I was a young language officer in Tokyo, my first posting, my favorite example is I once asked a Japanese watch manufacturer, I said, how will you compete against the Swiss? Because they've got, hundreds of years of watchmaking skills and marketing skills at their disposal. He told me something very interesting. He said, we took a map of the world, There were three major suppliers at that point of time. He said, we divided the world into three zones, A, B, and C. Since Seiko was the senior partner, we told him, you decide which one you want. This is hypothetical. He decided he wanted Western Europe and the United States, which was the big market. So Seiko took that. Out of the remaining two, Orient and Citizen, the other two took. So they organized themselves. I have absolutely no doubt, if our four low-cost carriers sit down together, there's enough money with the growth which is going to be made for all four to be successful. But on the other hand, if they compete against each other, then there will be, it's like countries trying to provide incentives on attracting foreign direct investment and outdo each other in a counterproductive way. Look, I am optimistic to the point of being bullish about the Indian economy. So when people come and tell me, ye ho gaya, wo ho gaya, I was very happy that our friend from the IDFC showed where have we come and where are we going. We are, with all the problems that come our way, why am I optimistic? One, I think much of this has something to do with a global environment. Now, that's no excuse. If the global environment is positive, if oil prices are very low, you take advantage. If the global environment becomes less than conducive, you adjust to it. There are both individual gainers and losers in that game, but I am confident because of two reasons. One, the Indian entrepreneurial spirit has not been, it's not. Some flight of capital takes place, some people look at short-term games, want to relocate, etc. But for every story like that, I've got 10 success stories. A friend from the IDFC provided, I came across a story the other day where, and this is my sector because I deal with public transport, two youngsters got together, looked at a gap which existed in the urban transport. They said, if you have a metro line coming up to here, you need last mile connectivity. With something like 25 crores, they started a business and they're laughing their way to the bank. In a few years' time, they're 2,500 crores. So there is going to be always all these things happening. When do we start seeing the turnaround, etc.? I'm not a soothsayer, but all I can tell you is, if you look at all the positive signs, green shoots, recovery, etc., it's not something that I would worry about. What I would agonize about more intently is let us get an understanding of the causation right. Because once you understand why a thing is taking place, you can correct it. And I think you have in Mr. Modi's government, a government which has gone from the corporate tax rate being the highest in the world to the lowest in the world. So when somebody tells me, well, look, this is the strain, my response then is always, well, give me a solution which is doable in terms of not putting a strain on something else in the economy. So thank you very much for sparing the time. And as I said, I started my professional life in Mumbai, and it's always good to be back here in the city which is both vibrant and which is and will always be the commercial capital of India. Thank you very much.